everybody, I'm Carla with Race to Walk, and it is time for another episode in Hack the Saga. So, what is this? Well, on my channel, Race to Walk, I started doing Bible studies and book reviews and basically sharing good thoughts about good words. And they were so good that people stole them. They stole the transcripts. They sabotaged my videos to hide the theft. And that led to, that led to this, Hack the Saga. I started, what the heck? Okay. I did have a screen showing my page, but let me see. Let me see if I can do this. Anyway, I ended it, I guess, too soon. So, hold on. Screen. Where's my... Here we go. Okay. So anyway, this is my page on my site, racewalk.org, Hack the Saga. I haven't updated this yet. Actually, up to 57 episodes. I have a whole long list of updates. When I first discovered, when I first started being hacked, I reported it to law enforcement. Nobody did anything. When I started discovering that my work had been stolen, I reported it some more. Nobody did anything. And so just a few months ago, after being hacked continuously for since December 2023, and who knows, I've lost count of the number of reports I've made. I just started naming names. And this is just an example of an individual episode. This is a new format. I haven't gotten them all transferred over to that. But anyway, so because I am not getting a response, and because the people who sabotaged me and stole my work have been blocking my communications, I've just been putting it out publicly. And so that's the title of the stream, The Destruction of Man and the Modern Day Macbeths. So ironically, I was using an AI prompt to generate some keywords for the YouTube description. And at first it came up and said, well, it's very inflammatory, the title. That's just the title of the essay, and nothing I could say could be as inflammatory as all the things that they've done to me. And I have literally exhausted every avenue. This was left. And so if they didn't want to be named publicly, they shouldn't have been blocking my communications. I would have let an attorney talk to them if I could have gotten a hold of one, but they've literally been blocking my emails, blocking my phones. And as I said in the last live stream on Monday, I know that it is with government resources. There are certain people that are being covered up for, like I said in the stream on Monday. One of those is Annie Nardoni, but there's other people I can tell that have been primarily because I have people hack me, and then there's priority with the hackers of like what to delete out of my laptop or sabotage on my website. So anyway, you can kind of tell, not kind of, you can tell by the response what exactly it is most important to them to cover up and hide. So anyway, so what is this about? So just for those of you who don't know my background, I graduated with a degree in cultural apologetics from Houston Baptist University. I started in 2015, and I graduated in 2017. And after that, some friends and I started a cultural apologetics journal called An Unexpected Journal. The first issue was 2018, and we published it quarterly. I was involved from, the conception of it through starting the journal all the way up until August of last year, when I realized, I had known that my stuff was plagiarized, but it was, I started realizing that was people involved with the journal, with the leadership of the journal that were part of that. So anyway, at the in the program that I went through, and that was as it was started by Dr. Holly Ordway. It was she designed it to be very rigorous. There's a lot of reading, a lot of writing. It was kind of an intersection between literature, history, theology, and philosophy. And if you're not familiar with cultural apologetics, a lot of people, when they think about apologetics, they think of people like Lee Strobel or William Lane Craig or the McDowells. You know, their reasons, arguments for God. And what cultural apologetics is that it takes something that is familiar in culture, and it shows how that thing that we love, that the thing that is good and true and beautiful about those things in culture, reflect an aspect of God. So, using C.S. Lewis as an example, he could do both cultural and traditional apologetics. His book, Mere Christianity, was propositional arguments, reasons for God. But he illustrated the same thing that he was talking about in Mere Christianity in his Chronicles of Narnia. So C.S. Lewis was really the foundation of the program. And I sometimes kind of think I have a degree in C.S. Lewis. We read a lot of his work. It was really centered around that. And the focal point, at least when I went through the program, it changed a lot very drastically afterwards. But when I went through the program, the focal point that every single person that went through the program took was research and writing. And in that, we read The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. If you've ever read The Abolition of Man, it's on the list of really, I can't remember who has it on the list, but it's on the list of the top most influential books of the 20th century. And he talks about the dangers of relativism, thinking that truth and right is centered in yourself. I have several book reviews on my channel, A Race to Walk, that about The Abolition of Man. I have an interview with Dr. Michael Ward that is, he wrote kind of a companion book. It's sort of an annotation to The Abolition of Man called The Abolition of Humanity. And if you're going through The Abolition of Man by yourself, I highly recommend it because it's very dense. It was written to Lewis's fellow academics. He saw some of the things that they were doing, some of the attitudes that they had, similar to, he doesn't come out and say it, but he's basically equating their attitudes with that of the Nazis. So this was written at the beginning of World War II. So anyway, it's a pretty it's not a very long book. It's more like an essay, but it's pretty dense. Now, the other thing that we read in that same class was we read Macbeth. And one of the last essays that we wrote in the class was on Macbeth. And obviously, in this class, you're supposed to be integrating everything that you wrote. And so the essay that I wrote in that class was called The Destruction of a Man, or Macbeth and the Destruction of a Man. So anyway, going back to An Unexpected Journal. Again, we started this journal in 2018, and we did a number of different, did a different topic every single quarter. If you go to anunexpectedjournal.com and go to the archive, you'll see we did issues on superheroes, we did issues on film and music, we did on dystopia, mystery, and one of the essays, or one of the issues that we did was on Shakespeare, and this was in Advent of 2022, and we were in a position of trying to kind of shift gears a little bit because since we started in 2018, we have been just working in a dead-on sprint the whole entire time. Our lead time was next to nothing. What we were trying to do in that winter and then the coming spring is we were trying to get ahead. At least I thought we were. That's what we were talking about on our publishing schedule, so that we'd have a more reasonable publishing schedule rather than literally being down to the wire every single time. We were going to be trying to have the issue done like the previous quarter, so we'd have a full 3-month lead time on it. That was what my understanding was the goal was. And little did I know that this is what it looks like to me, that about that same time, people involved in the journal and some of the people came on leadership on the board specifically to sabotage it. And so as for me personally, I just have to say that I love being part of the journal. I loved working with all the contributors when we started the live stream launch parties in June of 2022 or 2021. I loved meeting the contributors and getting more insight about their stories. I loved being a part of it. I did, but it was never something that I was going to be felt like I was going to be doing forever. I mean, I personally, there's certain things that God has literally told me, has given me, right? So my publishing company, Effusion Media Group, that was something that God gave me. He gave me the vision and the name and the word, Effusion. He gave that to me. The other thing was he gave me Bright Sheep Ministries International. And at the time, I was like, okay, what does this mean? And this is before I had even gone into the apologetics program. I had been publishing on my site, racetowalk.org, since 2013, but I was just writing. So Bright Sheep Ministries, that YouTube channel, actually is a channel that they hijacked off my account when they basically did an account taker, hacked and did an account taker over all my accounts a year ago. Still have not gotten that channel back. But anyway, that's what God gave me. That is what I didn't know what exactly it would look like, and especially for the Bright Sheep Ministries, in Texas, all you have to have is 3 officers for your file nonprofit. But I didn't want to have it just be me. When I formed it, I wanted it to be with people who had an idea and wanted to be part of it. And I didn't really know exactly what it was going to be either. I just knew that God had given that to me. But so I wasn't in a rush because I didn't really feel like I had the pieces together, or really the path or the people. And so when I was working on the journal, my goal was to get it to the point where we could just say, this is what we are, this is what we do, and we are worth investing in and looking for grants, so that whoever was running the journal could be paid for their time, for their work. That was my goal. And we had started to do that in 2019, or not 2019. 2019, we were just basically learning how to get out issues. 2019, we started expanding a little bit, and I went into tables at different conferences and things. We started getting more people beyond just our group in the apologetics, the apologetics program. And 2020, the goal was we were going to, look for grants, and things just didn't work. 2020 was a crazy year, and we had started some conversations with some grant writers, and it just, you know how 2020 was. It just didn't come about, so we just kept on going. And so, anyway, that was, I never saw, I wanted to help launch it. I never saw myself as, you know what I mean? I wanted to create a thing, not necessarily, do that for the rest of my life. Not that I don't enjoy it, it's just, I knew God had given me something else. So, anyway. So, 2022, that Shakespeare and Mystery, we were basically trying to put them together at the same time. So Zach and I were working on Mystery, getting things in and edited, and which was spring of 2023, trying to get it put together ahead of time. And then the idea was that they were going to have a couple of outside guest editors do the Shakespeare issue. And one of those editors was Joe Rickey, and the other person was Sarah Waters. So I just have to say, it seemed to me like Joe did most of the editing. That's just what it seemed like to me. I wasn't super involved in it, but that's what it seemed like to me. And then Ryan Grube was the person who was putting the manuscript together. So the manuscript and the cover. So that was one. Other than that, there was he put everything together for Planet Narnia and everything together for Shakespeare. Other than that, I did the manuscripts, even on the cover. He did a couple other covers, but other than that, I put the manuscripts together. So anyway, also during this time, in 2021, I had started, my friend Mark Ritchie had asked me to put together, or to help him teach some of his classes that he was doing in Pakistan via Zoom. We didn't obviously go there. We were just teaching via Zoom and communicating on WhatsApp. And I started teaching Pakistanis in, would have been October 2021. And so during that, so I'm still publishing YouTube videos on Bible studies and book reviews. I was super consistent from 2019 through most of 2022, but 2022 I started slowing down because 2021 I started doing the Bible studies with the Pakistanis. I also started doing I started teaching once a month at my Bible study at Second Baptist in Kingwood, Texas. So I was writing those, which they happened to steal. They stole all that entire series. And so, I'm doing those things, and just keep in mind, this is all like side gig stuff. This is not making me any money at all. I still have not made a dime off of YouTube because somehow they have my YouTube channel locked so that I never get more than 2,500 watch time hours in the last year. Doesn't matter if I publish something, doesn't matter if I don't, it always stays the same. Never. Sometimes it gets up to 2,600, but then it will drop back down. Basically, they have, I don't know, I think what it is, it's some weaponized AI program, and they're stealing, hopefully, actually, let me change this. I can tell that this is my video having the backgrounds causing a problem. So let me see if I can change this. Hold on. Sorry. Video. Hold on. I should have known. Should have known that wouldn't work. Anyway, I like the purple, but obviously it's going to cause problems with the stream, so we won't do that. Anyway, so where was I at? That kind of threw me off. So anyway, so Joe Rickey and Sarah Waters were working on that, and I had. This is what I was saying. So I was doing all that, all the side gig stuff. I'm not getting paid for any of it, right? Because I'm not even making money off of this. And this is a time, as I can tell from the different toxic links that are pointing to my site, that my site had started being sabotaged in 2021 pretty heavily. And not just the bad links to sync it and search, but also there was this weird thing where all my featured images were deleted. I had to go through all of that. I mean, it was just a lot. And I was like, it didn't really click to me that this was deliberate sabotage. I was just thinking, what was this? So anyway, so I'm not even getting any rewards for any of the effort that I'm doing. I did not know until fairly recently that these people from this apologetics program had basically lied about me being involved with them or stealing my work, because I was just producing, right? I'm not getting paid, but I'm producing. And then I didn't really start slowing down until 2022 when I had all these other things going on. But anyway, so I have all these things going on. I'm teaching at church. I'm still trying to do the Bible studies I have online. I'm starting to see all these things on my site that I have to go back and fix. And then this is also during the time when, so my friend Mark, who had been teaching the Bible studies in Pakistan, the Pakistani pastors that he was working with there were helping the Afghan refugees. After we pulled out at the end of 2021, a lot of them escaped to Pakistan, and so these pastors were helping, and so Mark got involved with that as well. Started teaching Bible studies with them, but they also had immigration needs, and so I would sit in on some of these meetings that he had with them, and so that was another thing, right? So this is all coming into the end of 2022. And so anyway, we're coming into it, and I had this essay that I had written for the research and writing class on Macbeth. So I submitted it. So I get a response back. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, and I had so many different things going on. I get a response back from Joe Rickey, and it was pretty. I mean, I didn't take offense at the time, but now looking back on it, I could see that it was really harsh and like inappropriately so. Like it just was inappropriate. The level of harshness, like we would never speak to contributors that way. I mean, we just wouldn't, even if their work was complete crap. But anyway, but again, some of the things he said was, well, you aren't. He was basically treating the journal like it was a literary journal, like we were supposed to compare Shakespeare to himself. This is not an unexpected journal. It's not a literary journal. It is a cultural apologetics program. And in cultural apologetics, you compare whatever it is that you're talking about to Christ, to God. That's the comparison. That's what cultural apologetics is. And he's like, well, you just have to, basically, he wouldn't publish it unless if I made significant changes and basically rewrote it. And I read through it, and like some of the things, I'm like, I don't know. I just didn't. First of all, I had a lot on my plate. Second, I didn't agree with some of the things he was saying, and I wasn't going to get into an argument with him about it because I'm thinking, okay, this person is investing time into this, and so I'm not going to get into an argument about it. It kind of seemed to me like he was carrying the load of the editing. So anyway, just let it go. And again, I had tons of things going on. Anyway, so we get to the end, and I'm not really involved in that part. Jason Smith is the main contact with Joe. He's the one that brought him in, and then Ryan Grube was doing the cover and putting it together. And I had a whole, like, literally step by step how to put the journal together. And so Ryan a couple times had asked me, questions about things, but that was about it. And then when it got to the end, I was waiting. So it was literally like, I don't know if anybody watches these videos that was on the journal mailing list, but we always did the launch parties the third week of the month. So it would be like 2.5 weeks after, because the journal would launch on the first Wednesday of the month, and then we would do it on the third Saturday, unless we had to adjust it for a holiday. And we had just scheduled the date for it, right? And so it was so late that it was like, we have to have, it was like literally that week coming out. I didn't even see the cover this cover until I think it was Monday of the week where we're having the launch party, and I still had to put together all the the previews and everything, because I would wait to see the cover and then kind of see what kind of feel it gave me, and then I would choose music, and that kind of determined what the preview and the elements would be. So anyway, when I saw this, I was like, is this a joke? I mean, are you kidding? And I have to say, it grew on me. But if you go and you look at the archive of the journal, this is like nothing like anything that we had done. It looks like there's a little bit of quirkiness, because I don't think you can tell, but the little circles that go around the border, those actually have Shakespeare's face in them. And Brian said that I was like, are you trying to make this like boring like any of the other shows? I don't know. I don't know. This would not have been my choice of cover. And like I said, it has grown on me. I do like it better than I did to begin with. But anyway, so then I get the manuscript to upload it to all the platforms, and or the file to upload, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, there was like mistakes all over the place, and I started going through it and like just highlighting. I couldn't even edit anything because Ryan was doing it. He was doing it in a Mac, and so I was highlighting all the things. And the worst ones were actually the ones with for the contributors were pretty solid, although there were footnotes that weren't completed that I had to go back and add, or that needed to be added. But it was like Joe's and Sarah's stuff. It was like, what the heck? And so I went and I sent it. I highlighted everything and I sent it back to Ryan. And he changed. I think he added the footnotes. He's like, I don't have time for this. I can't do this. And he just gave it to me. I'm like, I mean, I was just like so overwhelmed at this point, because I'm doing the mystery one. This was a month that the Afghans had to go back to Afghanistan to wait for visas. Mark was sick, couldn't get a hold of him, so I'm getting these frantic phone messages from the Afghans all the rest of life, and then this issue that's supposed to be that I'm not supposed to have anything to do with. It's like, I mean, this is the thing. I think if you go back and look through the journal, like from the very first one on the abolition of man to the last one that we're involved in, I think you can see we improved, or at least I improved in formatting, catching errors, and things like that. It wasn't worth what we did with our first issue, but we had improved. And so it really killed me to publish something that I knew had so many errors in it. But I mean, I couldn't even change it myself because it was in a different format. Anyway. And so that was all. I just thought it was like a learning curve. But at this point, with everything else that's gone on, knowing that not only that Jason Smith and Ryan Grube have been part of the sabotage, and Jason Smith being one of the primary people that was hacking me, I think that might have all been part of the plan. I also think that Joe's response to my essay was also deliberate, not sabotage, but basically attack. And I think what I suspect is that it was because that essay that I wrote and submitted had already been stolen. I know for a fact that was the case with my essay from Film and Music on Shauna Arbach creating poetry on screen that I submitted in the film and music class in 2015. I know that for a fact. Annie Crawford had been like, it was the same sort of thing. Basically, this doesn't meet the prompt, da 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 da. And so I basically rewrote the whole thing. There's probably only about 5% similarity between the essay I originally wrote and this one on the making of a hero. And so I think I think that's probably, I honestly think that that's probably the reason. So here's the thing. I am going to read this essay, and if anybody out there, because this is what I know that they do. They put themselves out as these Christian content experts, but what they're doing is they're going and stealing work from various people, not just me, not just me. They're doing it to a lot of people. I know this for a fact to be true. So I'm just going to read this, and I have been publishing my cultural apologetics essays on my Substack. It's racewalk.substack.com. I'll put this up here later. I was planning on doing this before because I was going to be adding it. But so the rest of this is I'm going to be reading my essay. But I just want to say that people they're not like if you know somebody and you say, oh, they're a good person. Okay, they may be good in the context that you know them in. You have to know them for a little bit and see them at how they act in different situations to be sure if they actually are a good person or if they just happen to be having a good day, right? And even if you know somebody that's a good person at one point in time, it doesn't mean that they stay that way. I mean, we aren't, it's our profession of faith as Christians that we have a fallen human nature. And that is what necessitated Jesus dying on the cross. And it's through the empowerment of the Holy Spirit living within us that we can have victory over our natural bent to be bad, right? This natural bent to be self-centered and prideful. And so that's our profession of faith, right? That's the foundation of the Christian faith. I'm not saying anything radical. This is just the entire point. And when I read this, I honestly, when I went back and looked at it, I was thinking, what was I thinking of at the time? Or was there somebody specific that I was thinking of? Because, I'm writing this and I know, like, knowledge base, I know the concept of what I'm saying, but I'm thinking, was there really something that I had in mind? Because now I know this firsthand, and I think part of this was God preparing me for the betrayals. I wrote this in 2016, 2020. I did a reading vlog on the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and that was I was thinking that was the beginning of God teaching me about the interaction between form and spirit, but I realize now that he's been talking to me about this for a long time, and it's really, I don't know. I mean, and even just being friends with the Afghans and knowing their story and the amount of betrayal that they've been through, it's like I'm dealing with this, constantly, and the people that have betrayed me have been shocking to me anyway. But I realize that it's not really, it's not unusual. It's not unusual at all. But as I read this, think about situations that you know of and realize that wherever you think you are right now, let's say you think you're good with God, you're good with your fellow human beings, this could happen to you, right? We always have to continue walking in Christ. We can't just one day decide, oh, we do all these good things and then decide to go off the rails, right? Because, we literally, our character is what we do. And that's the point of Macbeth. But I'm just going to read this essay right now. So anyway, In Macbeth, Shakespeare presents a strong warning to those who would pursue an end at the expense of all else. His portrayal of a once hero who descends into despot shows how the rejection of an absolute moral law can quickly lead to rejection of others. Macbeth ends so dramatically depraved that it is easy to forget that he does not begin the play that way. He begins as a hero, someone looked up to and admired, well deserving the epithet of brave. In the opening act, fighting against the traitor of his king and winning the battle, he did not give a thought to his own disdaining fortune. He put the king's interests above his own. He did not give room to the enemy. He never shook hands nor bade farewell to his opponent until he unseated him from the nave to the chaps. He was so stalwart that Shakespeare uses him to embody justice itself in scene 2 of the first act, saying, "No sooner justice, Macbeth, had with valor armed, compelled these shipping kerns to meet their heels." However, after every great victory, temptation is always waiting in the wings. Macbeth, like most people, did not set out to become morally depraved. People do things that they do because, in their minds, it is reasonable and right. They believe they are justified in doing so, according to their own personal standards. If it was the right thing to do, it was the right thing to do. In an article on Evil in Actions, Dr. Carolyn Kaufman quotes from Evil Inside Human Violence and Cruelty by Roy Baumeister. The face of evil is no one's face. It is never our own, which is very likely why we have such a difficult time seeing it in our own actions. This is particularly true for those who have an overall habit of righteous living, and even more so when other people praise them for it. If we fall into the danger of succumbing to the praise for right behavior, as if it is something extraordinary rather than something we are called to do, we have begun to unwork the knot of one of our lifelines to the moral law. When an artist creates a work and receives praise for it, it is credit to his own talent. It is something unique to himself, coming out of his own thoughts, ideas, and perspective. Right behavior is not unique to an individual. It is something expected of all. As C.S. Lewis points out in Mere Christianity, we expect that others know and should adhere to the same beliefs about right and wrong as we do. Not adhering to that universal law is a failing. Doing the right thing is expected as a norm. The understanding that right is outside of ourselves is one of the methods Aquinas uses to argue the existence of God in his fourth way, called the gradation of being. All standards of goodness and right behavior not only is outside of ourselves, but from God himself. We are only able to be good to the extent that we reflect his qualities. Paul, echoing the Old Testament prophets, parses no words when he states the same thing multiple times in Scripture, saying that we have no righteousness apart from Christ. All rightness we have is to the glory of God. If we take his glory reflected in us and attribute it to our own self and ideals, we are in danger of not only falling into the sin of pride, but also the deception that we are the arbiter of what is right, of what right behavior is. Macbeth was prepped by praise for his fall. Once Macbeth was conditioned to think well of himself for simply doing the right thing, the stage was set to consider the rightness of those actions as something he could determine. Evil begins when we ignore this universal moral law and fall under the delusion that right or wrong is based entirely on what we think it should be. If the moral law is a dock in the harbor of right living, we should anchor the raft of our life with as many moorings as possible. Any point where we decide a particular aspect of the moral law is not applicable or useful to us is a loosening of a tie. Continuing to do so weakens our tie and sense of the moral law until all are gone and we are left adrift, carried by the current of whatever whim or emotion that happens along. Macbeth was anchored to right actions and values at the point of his victory over the Thane of Cawdor. This sensitivity was noted later by his wife when inciting him to murder his king. Yet I do fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. I should have turned off. Oops. Sorry. Should have turned off my notifications. Okay. His fall did not begin with the temptation to murder, but went to glory. The witch's prophecy that he would be king planted seeds of replacement in his mind. In order for that to occur, not only would Duncan have to die or be deposed, but his 2 sons as well. If they had said, "Kill the king and his sons" up front, he would have been appalled. The how is glossed over. Instead, they had him as Thane of Cawdor and king thereafter, rather than rejecting what they would place on him, pulling him into their plot, and treating their prophecies with skepticism as did Banquo. He allowed the thought to sit and entice him. It was at this moment his descent into darkness began. As Lewis points out, the moral law is at the best of times the weaker of the 2 impulses. We cannot afford to loosen any knots in our ties to it because it is with these inner things that all errors begin, each leading to greater evil as time goes on. This escalation of evil is what Jesus refers to in Matthew 7:13, warning, "Broad is the road leading to destruction." Temptations to fall meet us at every turn, and most of all within us. In Macbeth, this very real danger of spiritual temptation is given the physical form in the 3 witches. The plot of the witches is hinted at in scene 1 when the second witch states that they will begin their plan when the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won. In regards to their strategy, the end of the battle was a military win for Macbeth, but it was a loss spiritually, as the victory caused him to fall into pride and made him open to their suggestions. The danger to inner temptation and a contrast of responses to it is illustrated in Act 5 of Scene 1 of Macbeth, when Macbeth and Banquo encounter the witches. Banquo recognized them at the outset as up to no good, shocked when one of their prophecies proved true, saying, "What, can the devil speak true?" As Macbeth was pondering and exploring how the second prophecy to become king could come about, Banquo cautioned, "Oftentimes to win us a harm, the instruments of darkness will tell us truths. Win us with honest trifles to betray in deepest confidence." Macbeth did not heed this warning and instead continued his ruminations. To be fair, Banquo was not in the same spiritual and emotional condition as Macbeth. While he had been in the same battle, he had not been given the burden of the praise of the victory. However, he was also not given the warning against the danger the prophecies presented. When the witches set out their prophetic bait, Macbeth was given a warning in the form of a fear. Banquo noted it, saying, "Good sir, why do you start, and seem to fear things that do sound so fair?" Macbeth was given both an internal warning as well as one external in the form of a stalwart friend. However, he ignored both and allowed his mind to wander down the path the witches had pointed. This very thing is what Paul warns against in 2 Corinthians when he cautions against imaginations and proud obstacles. that are in opposition to God, but instead to bring every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. The reason for this is that evil begins with corrupted desires that are allowed to take root in the mind. Even good desires can be corrupted. Ambition that motivates a man to achieve can become a bad thing if it is allowed to become the overriding power and the determining factor of actions in a person's life. Lewis makes particular note of this in Mere Christianity, illustrating that good things can become corrupted apart from the moral law as a guide. Our desires can never be the absolute guide. And Lewis writes, the most dangerous thing you can do is to take any one impulse of our own nature and set it up as the thing you ought to follow at all costs. There is not one of them which will not make us devils if we set it up as an absolute guide. This is what we see in Macbeth. He himself acknowledged that he had no cause to act against Duncan except his own ambition, saying, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition which overleaps itself and falls on the other. However, rather than taking his own counsel and acknowledging that making becoming king the goal above all else, he allowed his mind to continue to dwell on it. Another rope tying him to the moral law was cut. Proceeding to the next stage of corruption, he brings his wife into the discussion, and Banquo is set outside of the circle of counsel. Often when we want to dwell or act on things we know are wrong, we will still want to try to justify them. Usually that attempt at justification is in the form of friends or family who we know will agree with us. Like Macbeth, we avoid those like Banquo who will tell us the truth at all costs. Lady Macbeth is often seen as sort of a harridan of hell, but are her motivations that much different than most women towards their family, or are they the same and she simply takes them to the extreme? How many mothers see all the wrongs in other children, but never in their own? How many wives will take offense at any slight to her own husband? If something is not done to his advantage, the other person is in the wrong. Lewis highlights this strong family partiality by women in his chapter on Christian marriage in Mere Christianity, suggesting it is the very reason men are appointed to the headship of the family unit as a protective measure against the woman's tendency to put her own family above all else, calling her the special trustee of their interests. When Macbeth sent the letter to his wife with thoughts and speculations on the witch's prophecy, he was sending it to his special trustee, the one by nature that would want to see it come about. Lewis considers it an obligation of the man to protect other people from the intense family patriotism of the wife. This Macbeth failed to do, and the outcome should be a warning to all. When two like-minded people are brought together with no opposing counsel, the only outcome is one of action. Lady Macbeth not only accepted the possibility of her husband becoming king, but she made it a mandate, one to be achieved at all costs. When Macbeth had second thoughts, his wife pushed on further committing him. When you durst do it, then you were a man, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more than man. She turned it from idle speculation or imaginations, as Paul would say, to a point of pride and respect. It was not now enough to be the man to his appointed place. If he did not reach for what was not his, he would lose her esteem. Pride had taken its place with ambition in his mind. This agreement between the couple in pride and ambition above all other things set them in their determination. James warns, where envy and selfish ambition exist, there is every kind of evil. The every kind of evil in the story of Macbeth manifested in the murder of Duncan and his retainers. the false accusations of his sons, the oppression and abuse of the people, and eventually the death of both Macbeths. Once they committed murder and treason, the last rope to the moral law in their lives was cut, and their evil quickly escalated. Wrong action also brings something else along with it, a fear of judgment. This is one more indication that each of us has a knowing that right and wrong is not left for us to settle. If it were, we would have no fear of what others would say regarding our actions. However, like Macbeth, when we do wrong, the fear is our constant companion as we refuse to repent, or as long as we refuse to repent. Macbeth, comparing it to his former state, describes it as, I had else been perfect, whole as the marble, founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing air, but now I'm cabined, cribbed, confined, bound in to saucy doubts and fears. His efforts brought no comfort or satisfaction to either of them. Lady Macbeth lamented, Not spad, all spent, where our desire is got without consent. To safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. There was no joy, they had no peace. The destruction of a man was now complete. He had lost his reason, seeing specters at every turn and losing the ability for rational, impartial thought. His mind was full of scorpions, tormented at every moment. He had gone from a brave, self-sacrificing hero to a despot, murdering women and children. He was so entrenched in evil that he seems incapable of any sense of remorse, feeling aggrieved that Banquo was safe while he lived in fear. Not willing to repent, he turned once again to those that had led him into bondage, seeking advice once again from the witches. Once again they gave him a prophecy that would betray him. Banquo's first warning against them proved true. The moral of the story of Macbeth is that the end does not ever justify the means. Our motivation and perspective are always in danger of corruption. The more we take in error, the less we are able to see truth until we are like Macbeth, seeing the good as bad. Macbeth, given over to evil, was slain by Macduff, the child of integrity. Malcolm, speaking to Macduff, echoes the words of Paul and the psalmist when he gives the exhortation, delight no less in truth than life. The consequences for doing otherwise are dire. Just as immoral law is outside of us and not subject to the whims of an individual, justice is also impartial. Malcolm acknowledges this at the beginning of his own dissent, saying justice is even-handed. However, he fails to heed his own advice. Shakespeare's Macbeth is a character study of the danger that lies within each one of us when we depart from the moral law and God's will. It should be seen as a warning. Each of us has a capability of falling as far as Macbeth because, as Lewis points out in Mere Christianity, badness consists in pursuing them, the desires, by the wrong method, or in the wrong way, or too much. Wickedness, when you examine it, turns out to be the pursuit of some good in the wrong way. The result of this corrupted focus of good is the inability to enjoy good, illustrated by Macbeth's ending soliloquy of despair. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player, that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So that was my essay on Macbeth, the one that Joe Rickey said was not acceptable for publishing in the Shakespeare issue of An Unexpected Journal. And that's his opinion. Whether there's a motivation behind it or not, I don't know. but I don't agree with them. And I like my essay better now than I did when I wrote it, because I know that it's actually speaking the truth. So anyway, that's it for today, and I am just going to. I'll probably publish this on my Substack if you want to visit that at Substack or racetowalk.substack.com. If you'd like to read it, if you'd like to support me and my work, you can donate on Venmo at Race to Walk or at $sign for Cat Race to Walk on Cash App or Chime. And I also have books that I've published. You can go to Fusion Where's my thing? I didn't have this up here. I published my propaganda and government corruption stream notes along with my hashtag no fear devotional, and that's on Fusion Media MG or my Fusion Media site. But anyway, the reason I published that is because this is a thing. This is what I'm assuming. I think that different people there's coordination. They know people, right? But I think that one set of them had more connections with political Texas Republicans. And I think another had connections with government contracts. But that propaganda and government corruption is about anyway, that devotional that I wrote was plagiarized and basically bastardized into a really blasphemous devotional. It was published on the YouVersion Bible app. That's the story of that one. So anyway, that's enough for today. And I hope you all have a great Labor Day weekend. And just remember, if you want to be good, you have to do good. But I'll talk to you soon.